Captain Elena Rodriguez had always known the Air Force loved its rules more than its pilots. After 8 years of service and countless missions over hostile territory, she understood the chain of command like scripture. Request clearance, wait for approval, execute only when authorized. But sitting in the briefing room at Kandahar Air Base, watching Colonel Marcus Thompson shuffle through his papers with the urgency of a man ordering lunch, Elena felt that familiar knot forming in her stomach. Ghost Squadron will maintain holding patterns until further notice, Thompson announced to the assembled pilots, his voice carrying the tone of a man who had never felt bullets whistle past his ears. Intelligence suggests increased surface-to-air activity in Sectors 7 through 12. No unauthorized flights. No cowboy missions. Elena's call sign, Ghost 1, had earned her both respect and suspicion over the years. She had a reputation for being where she was needed most, often before anyone realized she was needed there at all. Her F-16 had pulled more soldiers out of impossible situations than any other pilot in the squadron, but Thompson viewed her success as a problem rather than an asset. Captain Rodriguez. Thompson's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. I trust you understand the importance of following protocol. Your previous ... incidents have been noted. The room fell. Silent. Every pilot knew about Elena's last mission, where she had broken formation to assist a pinned-down Marine unit. She had saved 12 lives that day, but she had also disobeyed direct orders. The rescue had made her a hero to the ground troops, but it had painted a target on her back with command. Elena met Thompson's stare without flinching. Crystal clear, sir. Protocol first, live second. Thompson's eyes narrowed at her tone, but he continued with the briefing. Elena noticed Lieutenant David Brooks, her wingman, glance at her with concern. Brooks had flown with her for 2 years and knew that look in her eyes. It was the same expression she wore whenever she spotted enemy positions before anyone else. The same intensity that preceded her most daring rescues. After the briefing, Thompson lingered as the other pilots filed out. Rodriguez, a word. Elena remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Thompson closed the door and turned to face her, his expression carved from stone. I've been reviewing your file, he began, settling into the chair across from her. Exceptional pilot, outstanding mission success rate, but a concerning pattern of insubordination. You seem to think the rules don't apply to you. I think the rules should. Serve the mission, not the other way around, Elena replied evenly. Thompson's jaw tightened. The mission is whatever I say it is. And right now, the mission is keeping our aircraft and pilots safe, while intelligence develops a clearer picture of enemy capabilities. That means no heroics, no unauthorized flights, and absolutely no solo rescue missions. Elena felt the weight of his words, but she also felt something else, a cold certainty settling in her chest. She had seen too many good soldiers die while waiting for perfect intelligence and proper clearances. Sometimes the only difference between life and death was how fast you could get steel in the sky and ordnance on target. Is that all, sir? She asked. Thompson studied her for a long moment, as if trying to read her mind. You're a good pilot, Rodriguez. Don't let your ego ruin your career. One more unauthorized action, and you'll find yourself flying a desk instead of an F-16. Elena stood, her expression unchanged. Understood, sir. But as she walked toward the door, Thompson added one final warning. I mean it, Rodriguez. Next time you even think about breaking protocol, remember that I'll be watching. And I won't hesitate to ground you permanently. Elena paused at the door, her hand on the handle. For a moment, Thompson thought he saw her shoulders tense, but when she turned back, her face was calm as still water. Good thing I never think about breaking protocol, sir. I just do what needs to be done. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Thompson alone with the uncomfortable feeling that he had just threatened a storm and been answered with thunder. Outside, Elena walked toward the flight line, her mind already calculating fuel loads, weapons configurations, and response times. Because she knew, with the certainty that comes from experience and instinct, that somewhere out there, soldiers were counting on her. And when that call came, protocol would be the last thing on her mind. The desert wind swept across the tarmac, carrying with it the scent of aviation fuel and the distant sound of rotor blades. Elena looked up at the clear sky and smiled grimly. The rules of war were written by men who had never flown through hell, to pull angels from the fire. Soon, those rules would be tested. 3 days after Colonel Thompson's warning, Elena found herself in the squadron-ready room, monitoring radio chatter while officially grounded for routine maintenance inspections. Her F-16 sat in the hangar, perfectly airworthy but tagged, with yellow maintenance forms that would keep her earthbound for another 48 hours. Thompson's message was clear: step out of line and face the consequences. Lieutenant Brooks sat beside her, pretending to study approach charts while actually watching Elena's increasingly tense expression. The radio crackled with routine communications, weather updates, and status reports. Everything normal, everything by the book, everything wrong. "Go squadron, this is Eagle Command," came the voice through the speakers. "Be advised, increased chatter in Sector 9. Possible enemy movement. Maintain current patrol patterns and report any visual confirmation." Elena's fingers drummed against the metal table. Sector 9 bordered the area where Bravo Squad had been conducting reconnaissance for the past week. She had flown cover for their insertion and knew their patrol routes by heart. If enemy forces were moving into that area, those soldiers would be walking into a trap. "Brooks," she said quietly, "pull up the grid coordinates for Bravo Squad's current operation." Brooks hesitated. "Elena, we're not supposed to be monitoring ground operations while grounded." Thompson specifically said, "I'm not monitoring." Elena interrupted, her voice steady but her eyes intense. "I'm reviewing flight plans for when we get back in the air." Brooks knew better than to argue. He had seen that look before, and it usually preceded Elena doing something that saved lives and cost her career points in equal measure. He pulled up the coordinates on his tablet, angling it so Elena could see. The map showed Bravo Squad's position in a narrow valley surrounded by high ridges. Perfect terrain for an ambush. If enemy forces were moving into the area, the squad would be surrounded with no easy escape route. Elena calculated distances and response times in her head. Even if they scrambled immediately, it would take at least 20 minutes to get air support over that position. 20 minutes was a lifetime in combat. "Elena," Brooks whispered, noting her expression. "What are you thinking?" Before she could answer, the radio erupted with static. Then a desperate voice broke through. "Eagle Command, this is Bravo Actual. We are under heavy fire. Repeat, we are taking fire from multiple positions. Request immediate air support. Grid. Coordinates follow." Elena was on her feet before the transmission ended. The coordinates matched exactly where she had expected trouble. Bravo Squad was trapped in the valley with enemy forces on the high ground. Exactly the scenario that had been keeping her awake at night. "Eagle Command to Bravo Actual," came the response. "Copy your request. Be advised, no air assets currently available in your sector. Estimating 25 minutes to get support overhead." "Negative, Eagle Command." The voice from Bravo Squad crackled with desperation. "We can't hold that long. Taking casualties. Need immediate support." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the familiar fire building in her chest. 25 minutes. By then, Bravo Squad would be nothing but casualty reports and flag-draped coffins. She thought about Thompson's warning, about career consequences and military justice. She thought about flying a desk for the rest of her service. Then she thought about the 7 soldiers trapped in that valley, fighting for their lives while bureaucracy counted minutes. Brooks saw her decision in her eyes before she spoke. "Elena, don't. Thompson's watching everything. Your bird's tagged for maintenance. You'll destroy your career." Elena looked at him with the calm certainty of someone who had made an impossible choice and found peace with it. "My career won't matter much if I let good soldiers die because I was afraid to break a few rules." She headed toward the door, but Brooks caught her arm. "They'll court-martial you." Thompson's been waiting for this exact moment. Elena gently pulled free from his grip. "Then I'll face the consequences. But those soldiers won't die on my watch because I was too afraid to act." The radio continued crackling with Bravo Squad's increasingly desperate situation reports. Enemy fire intensifying. Movement on multiple ridges. Casualties mounting. Each transmission drove home the reality that every second of delay meant another chance for good soldiers to die. Elena reached the door and paused, looking back at Brooks. "If anyone asks, you tried to stop me." Brooks shook his head, then surprised her by standing up. "If anyone asks, I was checking the weather for the flight plan you're about to file." Elena smiled grimly. "There is no flight plan." "I know," Brooks replied. "That's what makes it perfect." As Elena headed toward the hangar, she knew she was crossing a line that would change everything. Thompson had made his position clear, and she was about to validate every concern he had ever expressed about her judgment. But somewhere in that valley, soldiers were dying while she worried about regulations. The choice, when it came down to it, was no choice at all. Behind her, the radio continued its litany of desperation, each transmission a countdown timer that was running out faster than regulations could respond. Elena picked up her pace, her mind already shifting into the cool, calculated focus that kept her alive through countless missions. Protocol demanded she wait for clearance. Honor demanded she fly now. The storm was about to break. Elena reached the hangar to find her F-16 surrounded by maintenance personnel, all wearing the studied concentration of people trying very hard to look busy. The yellow tags marking her aircraft as non-operational fluttered in the air conditioning like surrender flags. But Elena had spent enough time around military maintenance to know the difference between real work and bureaucratic theater. "Chief Martinez," she called to the senior mechanic, a grizzled veteran who had been keeping jets airworthy since before Elena had learned to walk. Martinez looked up from a clipboard, his weathered face carefully neutral. "Captain Rodriguez. Thought you were grounded pending these inspections." "I am," Elena replied, moving closer to examine the maintenance tags. "How's she looking?" Martinez glanced around the hangar, noting who was within earshot, then stepped closer to Elena. "Between you and me, Captain, this bird's ready to fly. Has been since yesterday. These tags ... He gestured dismissively. "Let's call them administrative in nature." Elena felt a surge of anger, but kept her voice level. "Administrative." "Colonel Thompson's orders," Martinez confirmed quietly. "Said to take our time, be thorough. Make sure everything's perfect before clearing her for flight status." Elena understood perfectly. Thompson wasn't just grounding her. He was sending a message to the entire squadron. Cross him and find yourself watching from the sidelines while others flew the missions. It was psychological warfare disguised as standard procedure. The radio in the hangar crackled to life with another transmission from Bravo Squad. The desperation in the soldier's voice, cutting through the mechanical noise like a scream. "Eagle Command, this is Bravo Actual. We have 2 men down, Kier. Enemy forces advancing on our position. Where's our air support?" Elena's hands clenched into fists. 2 soldiers were already dead, and more would follow while she stood in a hangar looking at artificial maintenance tags. The absurdity of it hit her like a physical blow. Somewhere, mothers and fathers would get folded flags because their sons died waiting for a perfectly airworthy jet to pass an inspection that existed, only to prove a point about chain of command. Martinez watched her face, recognizing the expression of a pilot who had reached her breaking point. "Captain," he said quietly, "I need to step out for a smoke break. Might take me 10-15 minutes. While I'm gone, I'd hate for anyone to accidentally remove those tags," thinking the inspection was complete. Elena met his eyes, understanding the risk he was taking. Martinez had 3 more years until retirement, and helping a grounded pilot steal a jet could cost him his pension. But he had heard the radio transmissions too, and like her, he understood that some things mattered more than regulations. "Chief, you could get in serious trouble," Elena warned. Martinez shrugged. "Captain, I've been fixing jets for 27 years. I know the difference between broken and grounded. This bird's not broken." He handed her the maintenance clipboard, then began walking toward the hangar exit. "Like I said, 10 minutes. Elena looked at the clipboard, then at her F-16. The aircraft sat waiting, fully fueled and armed for the patrol mission she had been scheduled to fly before Thompson's games began. Everything she needed to respond to Bravo Squad's emergency was right in front of her, except her mission. A radio crackled with another transmission, this one from Colonel Thompson himself. "All Ghost Squadron aircraft, this is Eagle Command. Maintain current positions. No deviations from assigned patrol routes without explicit authorization. Acknowledge." One by one, the other pilots acknowledged the order. Elena listened to their voices, professional and obedient, following the chain of command while soldiers died 25 minutes away. When the acknowledgments ended, Thompson's voice came again. "Ghost One, acknowledge last transmission." Elena keyed her radio, looking at her jet. "Ghost One copies, Eagle Command, maintaining position." It wasn't technically a lie. She was maintaining position in the hangar for now. But she could hear the satisfaction in Thompson's voice when he replied, "Copy. Ghost One, Eagle Command out." Elena set down the radio and walked to her aircraft. The maintenance tags came off easily, designed to be temporary barriers rather than permanent obstacles. She performed her pre-flight inspection with practiced efficiency, checking systems that she knew were perfect, because Martinez never let broken aircraft leave his hangar. Everything was ready. The jet, the weapons, the pilot. The only thing missing was permission from men who measured response time in procedures rather than heartbeats. Elena climbed into the cockpit and began startup procedures, her movements automatic after thousands of hours in the aircraft. The twin engines spooled up with their familiar whine, a sound that always made her feel like she was coming home. But today, that sound also marked the moment she chose honor over orders. As the engines reached idle power, Elena made one final radio check. Bravo Squad was still calling for help, their situation deteriorating by the minute. No other aircraft were available. No other options existed, except the one sitting in front of her, engines running, ready to fly. Elena taxied toward the runway without clearance, knowing that every second of delay meant another chance for soldiers to die. Behind her, Martinez returned from his smoke break to find empty maintenance tags scattered on the hangar floor and a missing F-16. He smiled grimly, picked up the tags, and began filling out paperwork for an aircraft that had never actually been broken. Elena's F-16 roared down the runway without clearance, without permission, and without a second thought about the career she was leaving in ruins behind her. The aircraft lifted into the crystalline sky over Afghanistan, climbing steeply toward the coordinates burned into her memory. 22 minutes had passed since Bravo Squad's first distress call. In her experience, 22 minutes in an ambush was usually 20 minutes too long. Her radio exploded with activity the moment she became airborne. Ghost 1, this is Eagle Command. Colonel Thompson's voice cut through the static like a blade. You are not cleared for takeoff. Return to base immediately. Elena switched to a different frequency, tuning into the ground force emergency channel. She could hear Bravo Squad's desperate communications, punctuated by gunfire and explosions. The situation was deteriorating faster than she had feared. Ghost 1, acknowledge transmission. Thompson's voice followed her, broadcasting on multiple frequencies now. You are in direct violation of standing orders. Return to base. Elena keyed her mic, but not to respond to Thompson. Bravo Actual, this is Ghost 1. I'm 5 minutes out from your position. Can you mark your location with smoke? The response came immediately, filled with relief and disbelief. Ghost 1, thank God. We're in the valley floor, eastern side. Smoke out. Be advised, we've got shooters on 3 ridges surrounding us. Elena pushed her throttles forward, the afterburners kicking in with a roar that announced her presence to anyone within 50 miles. The landscape blurred beneath her as she raced toward the sound of gunfire, her weapon systems already powered. Up and ready. Thompson's voice continued on the radio, now joined by other command personnel. All aircraft, this is Eagle Command. Ghost 1 is operating without authorization. Do not assist. Repeat, do not render assistance to Ghost 1. Elena almost laughed at the absurdity. They were ordering other pilots not to help her save dying soldiers, as if following regulations was more important than saving lives. But her amusement died when she saw the situation below. Bravo Squad was trapped in a kill box that would have impressed medieval siege engineers. Enemy positions dotted the ridges on 3 sides, with heavy weapons and clear fields of fire down into the valley. The soldiers had taken cover behind scattered rocks and a disabled vehicle, but their position was hopeless without air support. Bodies lay motionless in the open ground between their defensive positions, testament to the cost of waiting for proper procedures. Elena keyed her mic to contact the ground team directly. Bravo Actual, I see you smoke. Count 7 personnel. Multiple Kia, how copy? That's affirmative. Ghost 1, we started with 12. Lost 5 trying to reach better cover. Can't move without getting cut down. Elena felt the familiar cold calm settle over her, the mental state that had kept her alive through countless combat missions. Emotion was a luxury she couldn't afford when soldiers were dying. She banked hard to the left, identifying target priorities with the practiced eye of a predator. Bravo Actual, keep your heads down. I'm making my run. Elena rolled inverted and pulled the nose down into a diving attack, the ground rushing up to meet her with terrifying speed. Her targeting system locked onto the largest enemy position, a heavy machine gun nest that had been pouring fire into the valley. The missile streaked away from her aircraft like a bolt of lightning, followed by a second one aimed at an adjacent position. The ridge erupted in flame and smoke, the explosions echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Enemy fighters scattered from their positions, some on fire, others thrown by the blast concussion. But Elena wasn't finished. She pulled up from her dive and immediately rolled into another attack run, this time from the opposite direction. Her cannon roared to life, sending a stream of 20mm rounds into the remaining enemy positions. Rock and dirt exploded in geysers as the high explosive rounds found their targets. Jesus, came a voice from Bravo Squad. She's tearing them apart. Elena completed her strafing run and climbed steeply, gaining altitude for another pass. But her radio was screaming with transmissions from command. Ghost 1, cease fire immediately. Thompson's voice was barely controlled rage. You are engaging. Without target confirmation. Stand down now. Elena switched back to the ground frequency. Bravo actual. Status report. Can you move to better positions? Affirmative. Ghost 1. Enemy fire is suppressed. We're moving to extract our wounded and retrieve our gear. Elena watched from above as the soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, no longer pinned down by overwhelming fire. Her strikes had broken the ambush and given them the breathing room they needed to survive. But she wasn't done yet. Her thermal imaging showed more enemy fighters moving through the ravines, attempting to reposition for another attack. Bravo. Be advised. I see movement in the North Ravine. Looks like they're trying to flank your new position. Elena banked toward the new threat, her weapon systems already locked onto the moving heat signatures. But this time, when she fired, she knew she was ending more than an enemy attack. With each missile that left her aircraft, she was destroying any chance of salvaging her military career. Thompson would never forgive this insubordination. The Air Force might court-martial her, strip her of rank, possibly even pursue criminal charges. But as she watched her missiles eliminate the flanking force and heard the relief in Bravo squads' voices, Elena found she didn't care about the consequences. She had chosen to be a warrior instead of a bureaucrat, and sometimes that choice came with a price. Bravo actual. Air is clear. You're free to move to your extraction point. Copy. Ghost 1. We owe you our lives. Every single one of us? Elena climbed to a safe altitude and set course for base, knowing that a very different kind of battle was waiting for her on the ground. Behind her, 7 soldiers gathered their dead and wounded, alive because one pilot had decided that some rules were made to be broken. The radio crackled one more time with Thompson's voice, cold as space. Ghost 1, you are to land immediately and report to my office. Security will be waiting. Elena smiled grimly as the base came into view. Copy. Eagle Command. Ghost 1 inbound. The storm had broken, and now came the reckoning. Elena's F-16 touched down at Kandahar Air Base with the gentleness of a feather despite carrying the weight of certain court-martial. She taxied to the flight line where a reception committee waited. 2 Air Force Security Forces personnel, Chief Martinez, looking grim but proud, and Lieutenant Brooks holding a thick folder that Elena couldn't identify from the cockpit. As she shut down the engines and climbed out of the aircraft, Elena noticed something unexpected. A small crowd had gathered near the hangar, including ground personnel, other pilots, and what appeared to be several soldiers in army uniforms. Word had spread quickly about her unauthorized mission, and the response wasn't what she had anticipated. Captain Rodriguez, the senior security officer, approached with professional courtesy rather than hostility. Colonel Thompson requests your immediate presence in the briefing room. Elena nodded, pulling off her helmet and running a hand through sweat-dampened hair. I'll be right there. But Brooks intercepted her before she could take more than a few steps. Elena, before you go in there, you need to see this. He handed her the folder, his expression mixing admiration with concern. It arrived 20 minutes ago. Elena opened the folder to find official communications from several sources that made her breath catch. The first was a message from the commanding general of Regional Command South, commending the decisive action and exceptional airmanship that had prevented the complete loss of Bravo Squad. The second was a request from the Army's Tactical Operations Center for her immediate assignment to a joint task force specializing in close air support. But it was the third document that stopped her cold. A formal complaint filed by Master Sergeant James Parker of Bravo Squad, but not against her. The complaint was against Colonel Thompson, alleging that his deliberate delay of air support through administrative obstruction had resulted in unnecessary casualties and endangered American lives. How did they know? Elena asked quietly. Brooks smiled. Turns out Chief Martinez has been documenting every conversation, every order, every artificial delay that Thompson's been using to keep you grounded. And Parker's been recording radio transmissions from the field. They've got everything. Elena looked up to see Martinez approaching, his weathered face set in determined lines. "Captain, I've been fixing jets for 27 years, and I've never seen a commanding officer use maintenance schedules as a weapon against his own pilots. What Colonel Thompson's been doing isn't just wrong, it's criminal." "Chief, you could get in serious trouble for speaking up," Elena warned. Martinez snorted. "Captain, I'm 3 years from retirement, and I've got documentation that would make an investigator weep with joy. Thompson's been playing games with soldiers' lives, and I've got proof." As they talked, more people approached. Elena recognized several pilots from other squadrons, mechanics, communications personnel, and a growing number of Army soldiers who had apparently heard about her mission. But it was the appearance of Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, the base's deputy commander, that really surprised her. "Captain Rodriguez," Morrison's voice carried authority, but also something like approval. "Before you report to Colonel Thompson, I think you should know that Regional Command has already received Bravo Squad's after-action report. Very detailed, very complimentary regarding your actions." Elena felt a spark of hope, but tried to keep her expectations realistic. "Sir, I violated direct orders." Colonel Thompson made his instructions very clear. Morrison's expression hardened. "Colonel Thompson made a lot of things clear, Captain, including his belief that following procedures was more important than saving lives. Regional Command doesn't share that priority." The security officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught between conflicting authorities. Morrison noticed and addressed him directly. "Sergeant Williams, I'll escort Captain Rodriguez to the briefing room. Your services won't be needed." As they walked toward the headquarters building, Morrison continued quietly. "Captain, I've been watching this situation develop for weeks. Thompson's been using administrative actions to settle personal scores, and it's affected our operational readiness. Your mission today might have been unauthorized, but it was also exactly what a combat pilot should do when soldiers are dying." Elena felt the weight of uncertainty lifting slightly. "Sir, are you saying I won't face disciplinary action?" Morrison stopped walking and turned to face her. "Captain, what I'm saying is that sometimes the system corrects itself. Thompson's been playing politics with people's lives, and today his game's caught up with him. Regional Command is very interested in reviewing his command decisions, especially the ones that delayed air support to troops in contact." They reached the headquarters building, where Elena noticed several vehicles with higher command insignia parked outside. Morrison saw her looking and smiled grimly. "Regional Command doesn't usually make surprise visits for routine disciplinary matters, Captain. They're here because Bravo Squad's commander called his colonel directly, and that colonel called his general, and that general called Regional Command. Seems there are questions about why air support was delayed when aircraft were available." Elena began to understand. Her unauthorized mission hadn't just saved Bravo Squad. It had exposed Thompson's pattern of using regulations as weapons. The very documentation he had created to build a case against her had become evidence of his own misconduct. "Captain Rodriguez," Morrison continued as they approached the briefing room, "I want you to remember that you saved 7 lives today. Whatever happens in that room, you did the right thing. And you're not alone." Elena squared her shoulders and prepared to face whatever consequences awaited. But for the first time since taking off without permission, she felt like she might be walking into a battle she could actually win. Behind them, Chief Martinez was already on the phone with the Inspector General's office, armed with documentation that would turn Thompson's accusations into his own indictment. The hunters had become the hunted, and justice was about to be served at 30,000 feet. Elena walked into the briefing room, expecting to face Colonel Thompson's wrath alone, but instead found herself in what resembled a military tribunal. Thompson sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone, But he was flanked by two officers Elena didn't recognize wearing insignia that indicated they represented regional command. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison took a seat opposite Thompson, and Elena noticed a court reporter setting up recording equipment in the corner. "Captain Rodriguez," Thompson began, his voice carrying the sharp edge of controlled anger. "You stand accused of willful disobedience of direct orders, unauthorized use of military aircraft, and engaging in combat operations without proper clearance. These are serious charges that could result in court-martial and dismissal from service." Elena remained standing at attention, but before she could respond, one of the regional command officers cleared his throat. "Colonel Thompson, before we proceed with any charges, I think Captain Rodriguez should hear the full context of why we're here today." The officer, whose nameplate read Colonel Richards, opened a folder and consulted several documents. "Captain, 27 minutes ago, Master Sergeant Parker, from Bravo Squad, filed a formal complaint alleging that administrative delays prevented immediate air support during a combat emergency. He claims that available aircraft were held on the ground due to false maintenance issues while his soldiers died." Thompson's face flushed. "That's completely unfair. Standard procedures require standard procedures." Richards interrupted coldly. "Require that available air assets respond to troops in contact as rapidly as possible. They do not require creating artificial delays through administrative manipulation." Richards turned back to Elena. "Captain, Chief Martinez has provided documentation showing that your aircraft was fully operational 48 hours ago, but was tagged for maintenance that consisted entirely of paperwork reviews. Can you explain why an airworthy aircraft would be grounded during a period of active combat operations?" Elena glanced at Thompson, seeing the trap closing around him in real time. "Sir, Colonel Thompson ordered extended maintenance inspections. After my previous mission, he felt I needed time to review proper procedures." "Your previous mission," the second regional command officer spoke for the first time, "where you provided close air support to a Marine unit and prevented 50% casualties in an ambush situation. A mission that earned you a commendation from Marine Command and a request for future joint operations." Thompson stood abruptly. "This is irrelevant. Captain Rodriguez violated direct orders today, regardless of the outcome. Military discipline requires—" "Sit down, Colonel," Richards ordered with the quiet authority that comes with superior rank and absolute certainty. Thompson sat, his face now pale as he began to understand his position. Richards turned back to Elena. "Captain, your unauthorized flight today saved 7 lives and eliminated a significant enemy force. Your actions demonstrated exceptional airmanship and tactical judgment. However, you did violate direct orders. The question before us is whether those orders were lawful and appropriate." Elena felt the room's dynamic shifting like weather patterns. She had expected to defend her actions, but instead found herself watching Thompson defend his. "Sir, I followed my conscience and my training. Soldiers were dying while an airworthy aircraft sat grounded for administrative reasons." "Administrative reasons," the second officer repeated, consulting his own folder. "Chief Martinez has documented a pattern of aircraft being tagged for unnecessary maintenance whenever their pilots disagreed with Colonel Thompson's decisions. Captain Rodriguez, were you aware that 3 other pilots have filed complaints about similar treatment?" Elena blinked in surprise. She had known other pilots were frustrated with Thompson's leadership, but hadn't realized formal complaints had been filed. "No, sir, I wasn't aware." Richards leaned forward. "Captain Davis reported her aircraft grounded for attitude adjustment after she questioned a mission delay. Captain Williams faced similar treatment after requesting permission to support a convoy under fire. Your case appears to be part of a larger pattern of using administrative power to punish pilots for operational decisions." Thompson finally found his voice. "I maintain discipline in my squadron. These pilots need to understand the importance of following orders." "Whose orders, Colonel?" Morrison spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Because regional. Command standing orders are clear. Provide immediate air support to troops in contact using all available assets. Your orders directly contradicted higher command guidance." The trap had closed completely. Elena watched Thompson realize that his efforts to build a case against her had instead documented his own misconduct. Every artificial delay, every administrative punishment, every grounded aircraft had been carefully recorded by personnel who understood the difference between legitimate command decisions and personal vendettas. Richard stood, signaling the end of the proceedings. "Captain Rodriguez, your unauthorized flight was a violation of Colonel Thompson's direct orders. However, those orders themselves violated regional command guidance and endangered American lives. In light of the circumstances, no disciplinary action will be taken against you." Elena felt relief flood through her, but Richards wasn't finished. "Furthermore, effective immediately, you're being transferred to the Joint Task Force for Close Air Support, where your skills and judgment will be properly utilized. Colonel Thompson, you are relieved of command pending a full investigation by the Inspector General's office." The room fell silent except for the soft clicking of the court reporter's machine. Elena watched Thompson's career collapse in real time, brought down by the same documentation he had intended to use against her. Justice served with military precision. Richards handed Elena a folder. "Your new orders, Captain. The Joint Task Force is eager to work with a pilot who puts mission accomplishment and troop welfare ahead of political considerations." As Elena left the briefing room, she passed Chief Martinez waiting in the hallway. He gave her a subtle thumbs up and whispered, "Sometimes the system works, Captain. Sometimes it actually works." Outside, Lieutenant Brooks was waiting with a broad smile. "How did it go?" Elena looked at her new orders, then at the clear sky visible through the buildings. Windows. It went exactly how it should have gone. Justice flew faster than bureaucracy. The storm had passed and Elena Rodriguez was already flying toward her next mission. 2 weeks after Colonel Thompson's removal from command, Elena found herself standing in a very different briefing room. This one was located at Bagram Airfield, headquarters of the Joint Task Force for Close Air Support, and filled with personnel who understood that saving lives sometimes required bending rules. The atmosphere was professional but relaxed, focused on mission effectiveness rather than rigid protocol. Captain Rodriguez, General Patricia Hayes, addressed the assembled group. "Your actions at Kandahar have become required reading at the Air Force Academy. Not because you disobeyed orders, but because you demonstrated the kind of tactical judgment and moral courage we need in combat leaders." Elena remained seated as General Hayes continued. The Inspector General's investigation revealed that Colonel Thompson's command style had resulted in a 30% decrease in mission effectiveness and endangered multiple ground units. Your decision to act independently wasn't just justified. It was exemplary. The general handed Elena a folder containing her new assignment. "You'll be leading a flight of 4 aircraft specializing in immediate response to troops in contact. No bureaucratic delays, no artificial procedures. When soldiers call for help, you launch immediately." Elena opened the folder to find exactly what she had always wanted: carte blanche to save lives without interference. The mission parameters were simple and direct. Monitor ground frequencies. Respond to emergency calls. Ask questions later. It was everything Thompson's command had refused to allow. "Ma'am," Elena said, "this looks like a pilot's dream assignment. What's the catch?" General Hayes smiled. "The catch is that you'll be working directly with the same ground units you've been supporting. They specifically requested you by name. Seems word has spread about a pilot who shows up when others can't. Elena felt a warmth spreading through her chest. After years of fighting bureaucracy to do her job, she was being assigned to a position where her instincts and judgment would be valued rather than questioned. It was vindication served with military honors. "There's more," the general continued. "Chief Martinez has requested transfer to your unit. Apparently, he wants to work with pilots who appreciate the difference between real maintenance and administrative punishment. He'll be your senior maintenance chief, and he's bringing 3 of his best technicians with him." Elena smiled, thinking about the grizzled mechanic who had risked his retirement to help her launch that unauthorized mission. Having Martinez and his team would ensure that her aircraft would always be ready when soldiers needed help, without artificial delays or bureaucratic games. "What about Lieutenant Brooks?" Elena asked. "Already assigned as your deputy flight leader," General Hayes replied. "He specifically requested the position. Said something about wanting to fly with someone who knows the difference between following orders and following conscience." Elena felt the pieces falling into place. Her new unit would consist of people who understood that regulations served the mission, not the other way around. It was exactly the kind of command structure she had always hoped for, but never expected to find. General Hayes gestured to a wall map covered with pins marking current operations. "Your area of responsibility covers the entire southeastern region. Multiple Army and Marine units operating in hostile territory, often beyond the range of conventional air support. They need pilots who can respond immediately to emergency situations." Elena studied the map, noting the scattered positions of friendly forces across hundreds of square miles of dangerous terrain. Each pin represented soldiers who might need the kind of rapid response that had saved Bravo Squad. The responsibility was enormous, but it was also exactly what she had trained for her entire career. "Mom, what are the rules of engagement?" Elena asked. General Hayes smiled grimly. "Simple. When troops call for help, you respond immediately. You have pre-authorization for close air support in defense of American forces. No delays, no additional clearances required. The only rule is to save lives." Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. After years of fighting artificial restrictions and bureaucratic delays, she was being given the authority to do her job the way it should be done. No more watching soldiers die while waiting for permission to help them. "There is one more thing," General Hayes added, her expression becoming serious. "Colonel Thompson has filed an appeal of his removal from command. He's claiming that his actions were justified by Air Force regulations and that the investigation was biased. The appeal board will want to hear your testimony." Elena nodded grimly. She had expected Thompson to fight back, unwilling to accept responsibility for his actions. But she was ready for that battle too. The documentation was clear, the witnesses were credible, and the results spoke for themselves. "When do they need me to testify?" Elena asked. "Next month at the Pentagon. Your testimony will be crucial in ensuring that Thompson never gets another operational command. We can't have officers who value procedures over lives making decisions about combat operations." Elena thought about the soldiers who had died waiting for Thompson's permission to help them, and the others who had been saved because she chose to ignore his orders. The testimony would be difficult, but necessary to prevent other troops from facing the same bureaucratic obstacles. "I'll be there," Elena said firmly. General Hayes stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Captain Rodriguez, you've already proven that you're exactly the kind of officer we need in combat leadership positions. This assignment is your chance to build a unit that reflects those values. Make it count." As Elena left the briefing room, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. But unlike the burden of fighting her own command structure, this weight felt natural and purposeful. She was finally in a position to save lives without interference, to respond to emergencies without delay, to be the kind of pilot that ground troops could count on. Her radio crackled with a familiar voice as she walked toward the flight line. Ghost 1, this is Bravo Actual. We're deploying to Sector 12 tomorrow. Any chance we'll have our guardian angel watching over us? Elena smiled as she keyed her mic. Bravo Actual, this is Ghost 1. We'll be airborne before you hit the ground. Same promise as always. Copy that, Ghost 1. Good to know some things never change. Elena looked up at the clear sky, where her face-steam waited with Chief Martinez, already performing his pre-flight inspection. The aircraft gleamed in the afternoon sun. No maintenance tags in sight, ready to fly at a moment's notice. 6 months later, Elena Rodriguez stood at the podium in the Pentagon's largest briefing room, facing the Air Force Appeal Board, charged with reviewing Colonel Thompson's case. The room was filled with senior officers, legal counsel, and observers who would determine whether Thompson's relief from command had been justified. Elena wore her dress blues with the new ribbons she had earned leading the Joint Task Force, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, for her actions with Bravo Squad. Thompson sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, looking older and more bitter than Elena remembered. His legal team had spent the morning arguing that his command decisions were justified by existing regulations and that his removal was based on emotional reactions rather than military law. Captain Rodriguez, the board president, General Morrison, called her to testify. Please describe the events leading to your unauthorized flight on the date in question. Elena had rehearsed this testimony countless times, but standing before the board, she felt the weight of representing every pilot who had ever been forced to choose between regulations and saving lives. Her words would either validate Thompson's approach or confirm that mission accomplishment trumped bureaucratic procedure. General, for 3 weeks prior to the incident, Colonel Thompson had systematically grounded aircraft through false maintenance requirements whenever pilots questioned his operational decisions. My F-16 was tagged for inspection despite being fully airworthy, specifically to prevent me from responding to ground emergencies. Thompson's attorney objected. Speculation about the colonel's motivations is irrelevant. The aircraft was properly grounded according to standard procedures. Elena looked directly at Thompson as she responded. Sir, Chief Martinez documented every conversation with Colonel Thompson regarding maintenance schedules. The colonel specifically stated that certain pilots needed attitude adjustment, and that keeping them grounded would teach them proper respect for authority. General Morrison leaned forward. Captain, do you have evidence that Colonel Thompson deliberately delayed air support to troops in contact? Elena nodded to Lieutenant Brooks, who was serving as her aide for the hearing. He handed her a thick folder containing radio transcripts, maintenance logs, and written statements from multiple witnesses. General, on the day in question, Bravo Squad requested immediate air support while under heavy enemy fire. Multiple aircraft were available, but Colonel Thompson ordered all pilots to maintain holding patterns pending his personal authorization. When I requested permission to respond, he denied clearance and stated that Bravo Squad would have to wait for proper procedures. Elena paused, looking at the board members. 25 minutes later, when I launched without authorization, I found Bravo Squad had lost 5 soldiers killed in action and 2 wounded. The survivors confirmed that enemy fire had been continuous throughout the delay period. Thompson's attorney stood again. The colonel was following established protocols for confirming target information and preventing friendly fire incidents. Elena felt her composure slip slightly. Sir, there were no friendly forces in the area except Bravo Squad. The target information was crystal clear. The only thing Colonel Thompson was confirming was his authority to control every aspect of air operations, regardless of the cost in American lives. General Morrison studied the documents Elena had provided. "Captain, these maintenance logs show a pattern of aircraft being grounded immediately after their pilots requested permission for emergency response missions. Can you explain this correlation?" Elena looked at Chief Martinez, who was seated in the observer section. His testimony earlier had been devastating to Thompson's case, documenting multiple instances of false maintenance requirements used as punishment for operational decisions. "General, Colonel Thompson used maintenance requirements as a weapon against pilots who prioritized mission accomplishment over his personal authority. When Captain Davis requested clearance to support a convoy under fire, her aircraft was immediately grounded for hydraulic system concerns that didn't exist. When Captain Williams questioned the delay in supporting troops in contact, his jet was tagged for avionics issues that Chief Martinez later confirmed were fictional." Thompson finally spoke for himself, his voice carrying the same arrogant authority. Elena remembered. These pilots needed discipline. They were cowboys, acting without proper consideration for command structure and operational security. My job was to maintain order and ensure proper procedures were followed. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest as she heard Thompson's justification. Even now, facing the end of his career, he couldn't understand that his procedures had cost lives. "Colonel Thompson," Elena said, addressing him directly despite protocol, "what procedures justify letting soldiers die while airworthy aircraft sit on the ground? What command structure requires pilots to watch friendly forces get overrun while waiting for your personal permission to help them?" The room fell silent. Thompson's face reddened, but before he could respond, General Morrison intervened. "Captain Rodriguez, please limit your comments to factual testimony." Elena took a breath, regaining her composure. "General, the facts are simple. Colonel Thompson prioritized his authority over mission accomplishment. He used administrative actions to punish pilots who put soldiers' lives ahead of his ego. When I finally launched without permission, I saved 7 lives that would have been lost if I had continued following his orders." General Morrison consulted his notes. "Captain, your actions clearly violated direct orders from your commanding officer. Military discipline requires obedience to lawful commands. How do you justify your decision to disobey?" Elena had known this question would come, and she had prepared her answer carefully. "General, Colonel Thompson's orders were not lawful commands. They violated standing directives from regional command to provide immediate air support to troops in contact. They contradicted our fundamental mission of supporting ground forces, and they prioritized administrative procedure over the preservation of American lives." She paused, looking at each board member. "My oath is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not to enable the personal agendas of individual officers. When those two responsibilities conflict, the Constitution wins." The board recessed for deliberation, leaving Elena to wait in the hallway with Brooks and Martinez. After an hour that felt like a lifetime, they were called back for the verdict. General Morrison stood to deliver the board's decision. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this board finds that Colonel Thompson's relief from command was justified and appropriate. His use of administrative actions to delay emergency response missions violated Air Force doctrine and endangered American personnel. Elena felt relief wash over her, but Morrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, the board recommends that Captain Rodriguez be commended for her actions on the date in question. Her decision to launch without authorization prevented additional casualties and demonstrated the kind of tactical judgment and moral courage the Air Force requires in its combat leaders. Thompson stood abruptly, his face twisted with anger. "This is ridiculous. She violated direct orders and endangered military discipline. You're setting a precedent that allows subordinates to ignore any command they disagree with." "General, Morrison's voice carried the finality of absolute authority. "Colonel, the precedent we're setting is that mission accomplishment and troop welfare take priority over personal ego and bureaucratic power games. Captain Rodriguez exemplified the warrior ethos. You failed it." As the board dismissed, Elena felt the weight of 6 months of uncertainty finally lift from her shoulders. Thompson's appeal had been rejected, his relief from command confirmed, and his military career effectively ended. More importantly, the board's decision validated the principle that saving lives justified breaking bad rules. Outside the Pentagon, Elena stood with Brooks and Martinez in the crisp Washington air. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Master. "Sergeant Parker of Bravo Squad. Heard the news. Justice finally caught up with bureaucracy. Thanks for flying when it mattered." Elena smiled, looking up at the clear sky where aircraft from nearby Andrews Air Force Base traced contrails across the blue. Somewhere out there, other pilots were making the same choices she had faced, choosing between regulations and reality, between procedure and purpose. Her radio crackled with a familiar transmission from her current unit. "Ghost 1, this is Ranger Actual. We've got troops in contact in Sector 15. Request immediate air support." Elena keyed her mic without hesitation. "Ranger Actual, this is Ghost 1. I'm 2 hours out, but Ghost 2 is already airborne in your area. Help is on the way." "Copy, Ghost 1. Good to know some things never change." Elena climbed into her staff car for the drive back to the airport, where her F-16 waited to take her back to Afghanistan. Back to the business of saving lives without asking permission. Back to the war where warriors flew and bureaucrats stayed on the ground where they belonged. As the Pentagon faded in her rearview mirror, Elena smiled. Colonel Thompson had been wrong about many things, but he had been right about one. Some things never changed. When soldiers called for help, she was already flying. Legacy in the sky. 1 year later, Captain Elena Rodriguez had become something of a legend among ground forces throughout Afghanistan. Her call sign Ghost 1 was whispered with reverence in forward operating bases across the region, spoken by soldiers who knew that when death came calling, she would already be in the air with an answer written in fire and steel. The Joint Task Force for Close Air Support had grown under her leadership, expanding from a single flight to a full squadron of pilots who shared her philosophy. Mission first, bureaucracy last. Chief Martinez now oversaw a maintenance operation that kept aircraft mission-ready around the clock, with no artificial delays or administrative games. Lieutenant Brooks had been promoted to major and served as Elena's executive officer, helping train new pilots in the art of immediate response. Elena stood in her office at Bagram Airfield, reviewing after-action reports from the previous month's operations. 43 emergency responses, 38 successful extractions, over 200 lives saved. The numbers told the story of what happened when pilots were freed from bureaucratic constraints and allowed to do their jobs. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Master Sergeant Parker entered, now serving as the liaison between ground forces and Elena's squadron. His presence always brought a smile to Elena's face, remembering the desperate radio calls from Bravo Squad that had started everything. "Captain, we've got a situation developing in Sector 19, Parker reported. Delta Company is conducting a raid on a high-value target, but intel suggests they're walking into a much larger force than expected. They're requesting air support on standby." Elena was already reaching for her flight suit before Parker finished speaking. "How long until they hit the objective?" 90 minutes, Parker replied. "But given the terrain and enemy strength estimates, they might need immediate support once they make contact." Elena smiled grimly. 90 minutes was enough time to launch, reach the area, and establish a protective umbrella over the operation. No waiting for clearance, no bureaucratic delays. just professional pilots doing what they train for. Tell Delta Company that Ghost Flight will be overhead before they cross the line of departure, Elena said, pulling on her flight suit. And Parker? Yes, ma'am. Make sure they know we're not just on standby. We're already flying. As Elena headed toward the flight line, she passed a bulletin board covered with letters and photographs from units she had supported over the past year. Soldiers posing with hand-drawn signs, thanking the Ghost Squadron. Wedding photos from troops who made it home alive. Birth announcements from children who would grow up with fathers because Elena had chosen honor over orders. Chief Martinez was waiting by her F-16, the aircraft gleaming under the afternoon sun with a fresh coat of paint and new mission markings. 67 combat sorties, 43 emergency responses, 0 mechanical failures. The jet looked as eager to fly as Elena felt. She's ready, Captain, Martinez called out as Elena approached. Full fuel, full weapons load, and I checked everything twice. No surprises, no delays. Elena smiled, remembering the artificial maintenance. Tags that had once kept her grounded while soldiers died. Those days felt like ancient history now, swept away by leaders who understood that saving lives mattered more than protecting egos. Thanks, Chief. Keep an eye on the radio. If Delta Company needs us, we'll be there before they finish calling. Elena climbed into the cockpit and began her pre-flight checks, the familiar routine that had preceded countless missions over hostile territory. But today felt different somehow, charged with the electricity that comes before significant events. She couldn't explain the feeling, but her instincts had kept her alive through too many missions to ignore them now. The engines spooled up with their characteristic whine, and Elena taxied toward the runway where Major Brooks was waiting in his own aircraft. Ghost Flight had grown to include 6 of the most skilled pilots in the Air Force, all handpicked for their ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. Ghost Flight Tower, came the voice from air traffic control. You are cleared for takeoff. Weather is clear, visibility unlimited. Fly safe out there. Elena smiled at the controller's final words. Flying safe meant being ready for anything. Prepared to make the hard choices that saved lives even when they complicated careers. It meant choosing courage over comfort, mission accomplishment over personal safety. Tower, Ghost One, Elena replied as she lined up for takeoff. We're not just flying safe, we're flying to keep others safe. The afterburners kicked in with a roar that announced her presence to anyone within 50 miles, and Elena's F-16 leaped into the clear Afghan sky. Behind her, Brooks and the rest of Ghost Flight followed in perfect formation, a steel constellation of protection for the soldiers below. As they climbed toward their patrol altitude, Elena's radio crackled. With routine communications from ground units, supply convoys, and other aircraft. The familiar sounds of military operations in a combat zone, the background noise of a war that continued regardless of politics or personalities. But underneath it all, Elena heard something else. The quiet confidence of soldiers who knew that help was already in the air, pilots who understood that some rules were made to be broken, and leaders who measured success in lives saved rather than regulations followed. Delta Company would complete their mission knowing that Ghost Flight was overhead. Other units would conduct their operations with the certainty that immediate support was just a radio call away. And somewhere in a Pentagon office, former Colonel Thompson would spend another day in forced retirement. His career ended by his inability to understand that honor mattered more than hierarchy. Elena leveled off at 30,000 feet and checked her weapon systems one final time. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. When the call came, she would be prepared to dive from the sky like an avenging angel, bringing fire and fury to America's enemies and hope to America's warriors. A radio crackled with a transmission from Delta Company. Ghost One, this is Delta Actual. We're approaching the objective. Thanks for being there." Elena keyed her mic, looking out at the vast expanse of Afghan mountains stretching to the horizon. Somewhere down there, soldiers were counting on her to be ready when they needed her most. It was a responsibility she had carried for years, through bureaucratic battles and moral conflicts, through unauthorized missions and career-threatening decisions. "Delta Actual, this is Ghost One," Elena replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty of a warrior who had found her true calling. "We're not just here. We're already flying." And in the crystal-clear sky over Afghanistan, Captain Elena Rodriguez continued her eternal patrol, ready to answer any call, prepared for any emergency, armed with the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from following orders, but from following conscience. The Ghost was already flying, and the sky belonged to those brave enough to claim it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.